Well, we're going to call our meeting to order and thank everybody for coming out tonight. We've got a great crowd here tonight. We really appreciate everybody coming out. I would like to say to you, we are if you would like to be on the board of the Hood County Tea Party, if you'd like to serve in one of the positions that we have, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, or at-large member, if you would contact Maury Simpson. Dave Eagle, he's not here tonight, he called, and he's trying to get his business moved, but he will be here. Contact Irvin Merritt, sitting right over here with the cow phone. Everybody should know Mr. Merritt. Don Mycenter would be somebody else you can contact, or any of the board members, if you have any interest in serving on our board. We really appreciate it. I think y'all probably are tired of me standing up here and would like to get rid of me, for sure. So if you do, just contact one of us and say, hey, I'm interested in let's go. Because we, as our bylaws say, we need to replace this board by the end of this year. So our time is getting close, and unless we can talk the other board members to staying on, which I hope we can, then we're in good shape. But if you'd like to be on this board, please step forward or let us know. Now, there was, just to let you know, there's the Queen's Riddle. There's a little joke we got a copy of, and I'll let you know what's going on with our White House. The guy that's there, he was in England, and he said, Your Majesty.
We can't hear you.
Your Majesty, how do you run such an efficient government? Are there any tips you can give me? Can't hear?
Yeah. Now you got it.
Get it there. Okay, can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me now? There you go. That's a touchy little hummer. How do you run such an efficient government? Are there any tips you can give me? Well, said the Queen, the most important thing is to surround yourself with intelligent people. Obama frowned and then asked, but how do I know if the people around me are really intelligent? The Queen took a sip of tea. Oh, that's easy, she said. You just ask him to answer an intelligent riddle. Watch. The Queen pushed a button on her intercom, said, please send Tony Blair in here, would you? Tony Blair walked into the room and said, yes, Your Majesty. The Queen smiled and said, answer me this, please, Tony. Your mother and father have a child. It's not your brother. It's not your sister. Who is it? Without pausing for a moment, Tony Blair answered, that would be me. I said, yes, very good, the Queen said. Well, Obama went back home to ask Joe Biden the same question. I said, Joe, answer this for me. Your mother and your father have a child. It's not your brother, and it's not your sister. Who is it? I'm not sure, said Biden. Let me get back to you on that. He went to his advisors and asked everyone, but none could give him an answer. Frustrated, Biden went to work out in the congressional gym and saw Paul Ryan there. Biden went up to him and asked, hey, Paul, see if you can answer this question. Your mother and your father have a child, and it's not your brother and not your sister. Who is it? Paul Ryan answered, that's easy. It's me. Biden smiled and said, good answer, Paul. Biden then went back to speak with the President Obama. He said, say I did some research on this, and I have an answer to that riddle. It's Paul Ryan. Obama got up and stomped over Biden and angrily yelled in his face, no, you idiot, it's Tony Blair. That, my friends, is precisely what's going on at the White House. I got a kick out of it. I told Ray we got that the other house, said, save that, I want to read it. All right. At this time, we'll ask Maurice to come and do a prayer for us.
Shall we all please stand?
gracious Father, we come tonight giving you praises. And thank you, Father, for the things that you have provided for us. We thank you for the help that you are giving us. Father, we ask in the name of Jesus that you stay with our leaders, our true leaders, so that we might be going in the way that this country should be going, not the way that it is going, Father. Father, we pray for our workers on the front line, our senators, Senator Cruz, Senator Birdwell, and we have good commissioners here in Hood County, Father. We pray for them, and we ask that you just keep them undergirded and keep them strong, Father. And Father, we also pray and ask that you might touch some of those people in the White House so that they might change their ways, Father. Father, Scripture tells us that we're supposed to pray for our leaders regardless. So we are doing that, Father, and we want to thank you for hearing our prayers, Father. Help us to get through this trying time. Father, we just wanted to say thank you for this place that you have given us, and we want to thank you for the speaker that's going to speak tonight, and we ask that you be with him and help him to get his message through to all of us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You know, join me in the pledges to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now the Texas flag.
Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you all so much.
Speak.
At this time, I would like for all of our veterans to please stand. As our veterans. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate your service. And at this time, I'd like for all of our elected officials to please stand. Let's start right here with you.
Danny Tuggle, I'm Justice of Peace in Precinct 4.
Cotton Howell, Justice of the Peace, Precinct 1.
Abby Davis, County Treasurer.
Mike Lang, Constable, Precinct 3.
All right, we've got two that are going to start in January. Let's have them both stand up and introduce themselves.
Kathy Gwynn, Justice of the Peace, Precinct 3.
Katie Lang, County Clerk.
We had a city council up here a few minutes ago. I guess I run him off. Anyway, he's good at, I'm sure he'll be back. At this time, we're going to got a little basket we can pass around. Feel so glad to throw $1 in there. We appreciate it very much. We have so many bills we have to pay and things that we do.
He made you pay.
While we're doing that, and back, Johnny passing around. We've got a few announcements to make. As far as the tea party goes, our next two meetings are going to be on the second Thursday night, one in November and one in December, because of the holidays that are coming up. So on the second Thursday night in November, I want every one of you to be here, and I want you to bring your veteran with you. This is, we're going to have the honor flight group is going to be here. I understand it is a tremendous message that they bring, and the program that they do for the veterans is just outstanding. And they are working, they've been working with World War II vets. They're now working with Korean vets. So y'all come and listen to what they've got to say. It'll be very emotional, I'll guarantee you. And get the word out. Help us get the word out, because we want these people to know. I understand that Bert just got back from a trip with his father, on one of these.
Right,
And
that's last week.
we want to get Bert if he,
Yes.
in his capacity to come, so he can tell us about his experience. But I've heard these gentlemen before, and it's very good. So y'all please come and bring somebody with you. I'd like to expand these chairs all the way around the room. Put some more chairs out back, we love to do. I'd like to have a really big crowd for these guys, and really honor the vets, because they really deserve it. And then in December, second Thursday in December, you know, holiday season, right after Thanksgiving, but we're gonna have a potluck and politics meeting. We're gonna have a meal, and we had one several months ago, well attended, had more food than you could ever imagine would show up in place, but I know we fed not only the police department and people helping people, and Kathy could tell you all. Habitat. Out of what the people brought that night for that meal, so it was a fantastic deal. And we'll be getting information to you about that, but we want you to come and bring a guest, because we want this to be a fun night, and we'll open it up and we'll have a little discussion, excuse me, about some of the political things that are going on. It'll be after the election, you know. Most of it will be said and done at that point. So, y'all come, it'll be fun. And is there anybody else in the room that would like to make an announcement for a beer club? Katie?
Well, the Republican Club is meeting on Thursday the third Thursday of October, and our guest speaker is Roy. I forget his last name. Roy Kill, or I'm sorry, but anyway, it should be a very exciting meeting, and we welcome everybody to join. We're really trying to get all the Republicans to join us, so please come.
I know the Republican women meet, I think on the second, is that right, second Wednesday?
Third Wednesday night.
Third Wednesday.
And the speaker this month is going to be Steve Ministeri, the Republican, the RPT chairman. And it's going to be a catered luncheon that we're going to have a regular meeting at 10:30, but we're also going to have a catered lunch from Spring Creek. So if you plan to attend, you're going to need to RSVP for it, for the lunch part. So if you want information on that, you'll need to call Kay Crane. She would be, so call somebody, but call her because she's president, and, you know, we'll call her but her. Yeah, call her.
It's Roy Falls. Roy Falls is a guest speaker, and he's going to be talking about Kilroy was here when World War II.
All right, at this time, I'm going to call the brains behind our Tea Party group. Everybody says I'm the president of the Tea Party. My wife is the vice president. She does all the work. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. But while I'm still up here, I want to hold this book up. This is a book that our speaker and his wife Mel written. And if you haven't read this book, we would encourage you to get a copy of it and read it. They're both heroes in my eyes. And they went through a terrible ordeal. I can just see Mel trying to get to the hospital by reading this book. Their little legs just churning trying to get to the hospital. So I can see it. But if you haven't read this book, I encourage you to read deep insight into this great color. So we appreciate it. Read.
How many of you have not met Brian Birdwell?
Oh, I haven't.
Not many. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Let me see if I can make this work. Okay. Is it working? Is it working?
Yes.
Is it working? I consider Mel and Brian friends of mine, and they are both heroes. They really are. We were so blessed to get him as our senator because we got Mel. And Mel really keeps him going, let me tell you. And we love both of them. They're wonderful people. If you don't know, Brian was, Brian doesn't look too bad, does he? I mean, when you look at him, he doesn't look too bad. He might be run over by a 747, really. Brian was in the Pentagon on 9/11 and planning in his office. And so their book is a lot about that journey that they've had. They have set up their ministry is, what do you call it? What's the
Face the fire.
Face the Fire. And I know they spend time going to see burn victims, and they just do a great job. And Brian's done a great job with down in Austin for us. And I'm not going to spend any more of his time. I'll just let him come up here, Brian.
All right. When Don was saying, that you're the brains behind the.
He didn't say Brian.
No, he did. I thought, I heard him say brains. I heard him say brains and now brains. Remember, it's just like in the military. The XO always gets what the CO doesn't want to do.
That's right.
Oh, good luck. Thank you. Oh, okay, all right. Can you pull it just over here, that way I can set my notes up here and my bladder buster Coke up here? Yeah. That's good. It's good right here. Well, let me say thank you for the invitation to join y'all. Let me apologize for being a tad late. One of the, you want me to use the microphone? Everybody?
No.
No, okay. I'll use my colonel's voice. At least you won't have to listen to me for 13 hours, but that's enough. Let me apologize for being a bit late. Today I was in Waco most of the day. TCCRI had a luncheon at Texas State Technical College, and we did a panel for 2 hours on higher education, workforce development, and some other things. And then I had an office call with a young man, and then I came screaming back up to Granbury. I did not have the police escort in my rearview mirror, because that's the one I usually get. As I'm running around, you know what I'm talking about, Judge. You know exactly what I'm talking about. My Purple Heart plate buys me a lot of mercy, except in Travis County. Okay, Steve, you take care of yourself, bud. Thank you. What I wanted to do was give you just a synopsis of some big muscle movements, but let me give you the first big muscle movement, if I may. Many of you know Taylor Blackburn. Taylor is my district director here in the Granbury office. She handles the 5 northern counties of the district. We have 10 counties in the district. Shelley in the Waco office handles the 5 southern counties. Taylor is 8 months next week pregnant. 9 months. Okay. Well, she's due just before or the week of Thanksgiving, and her doctor gave her a rather novel concept called a travel ban. Yeah, we'll get to the Ebola thing if you want, but in doing so, it won't so much apply to Hood County per se, but in the next month or so, she will hunker down in the Granbury office, not travel to Johnson, Somerville, Ellis, Tarrant, and the like. But then after, I guess the week of Thanksgiving or maybe the week before, obviously the baby gets a vote here, but there'll be a maternity leave period that for a couple of months till sometime into February, until Taylor returns back to us after that. So, and the reason I'm telling you all that is so that if there's a noticeable period of time between sometime in November and February that you don't see Taylor, it's because she's bringing a new life into our great state and our nation. There are some big things going on right now, one of which is current voting. And if you may have seen in the news in the last couple of weeks, a Corpus Christi judge said Texas voter ID is no good. Fifth Circuit stayed it, and then the Supreme Court concurred. So the bottom line is, if you have not already voted early, voter ID is still in effect for this election, and I expect it will remain into effect because the Supreme Court, in fact, I honestly can't answer why the district court judge in Corpus took on the case anyway, because prior to last legislative session, the Supreme Court had already blessed voter identification laws, and so why we're revisiting that battle again, I don't know. But the bottom line is that there are 4 different identifications you can use when you go into the voting booth. Actually, it's 5, I'm sorry. A driver's license issued by DPS, a state ID, if you're not a driver but need a state ID issued by DPS, my personal favorite, the CHL identification, because those require the citizenship, U.S. passport, and a military identification card, be it retired or active. All 5 of those are the ID cards that you can use to vote, because they all require citizenship status to be able to have those cards in the first place. So if you haven't already voted, make sure you get out for early voting, because it's over there at the annex. And then if you're voting on election day, go to your respective precincts for the general election vote. How many of you are familiar with the transportation proposition that's on the ballot? I know the folks that went to Republican Women last week. I explained it in excruciating agonizing detail. I'd like to explain it again, if I may. If there's, some of you are shaking your head no. Don't do it again. You don't want me to do it again? You do. Okay. Let me explain to you what Proposition 1 is. Okay. Prop 1 is the ballot initiative that you're hearing Nolan Ryan talk about, better roads, safer roads, and the like. So let me give you just a little bit of background. I promise I will not filibuster on this particular issue, and do not grade me on my artwork. The state of Texas has a dilemma. You've all heard that the governor say 1,000 people a day are moving to Texas. Unfortunately, they're not bringing any pavement with them, but they're bringing their cars with them. But in doing so, you have, just use 1995, and then this is 2014. This is income, and this is expense in the y-axis. The gas tax generally brought in X amount of dollars. And then road construction costs, whether it was repair or rehabilitation. Usually repair is just a repave, restripe. Rehabilitation is, you see, they dig it up pretty deeply down to its foundational base. Those costs ran this way. And so in 2001, prior to 2001, the gas tax, this delta right here, was the, I don't want to say excess, but was the dollars that were allocated to new construction, and then these dollars here, in this bandwidth, were to repair and rehabilitation. In 2001, the X and Y axis crossed, where now this line that's dotted was what we were bringing in gas tax, but wasn't covering the entire delta of repair and rehabilitation. So what you started to see happening in 2001 was toll roads were being used to make up this delta of not only repair, but also additional road construction. It's one of the reasons why we have some of the toll roads we have. Not a fan of toll roads, but that's what had happened. So in the legislative session, this past go-round, there are, well, let me explain one other thing to you, and then I'll go through the legislative session. This is the entirety of the state budget. Okay, the state of Texas in state taxes spent $102 billion in the biennial budget that we passed last session. That does not include federal dollars. If you add federal dollars to it, our total state budget, what's called all funds, state and federal tax dollars, is about 196, 97 billion dollars. So almost half the dollars that we spend as a state come from federal taxes in the way of Medicaid, transportation, the federal gas tax, things to that nature. About 45% of the state budget is education, and that includes higher and K through 12. About 30% of the budget is Medicaid, and that leaves 25% is everything else. That includes TxDOT, judiciary, public safety, DPS, all those folks that give you the police escort on the state highways in the rearview mirror. Well, out of that 25%, about 7% of it is TxDOT for roads and road construction. Prior to Medicaid's passage in '64, about 30% of the state budget was roads and TxDOT road construction. Once Medicaid was passed in '64 federally, the state adopted it in '65, and the first budget in which it was implemented was '66. Medicaid has grown, and in particularly in the last decade, it's grown very rapidly. Right now, Medicaid's growing at about 12%, 14% every budget biennium, whereas the total state budget's growing at about 6%. So you can see that delta, that at some point, Senator Nelson, as Chair of Finance and Health and Human Services last session, said that there will come a point in about 10, 12, maybe 15 years where higher ed and Medicaid are going to flip, where Medicaid is going to be the #1 expense of the state of Texas, and higher education, K through 12, will be less than that, at 30, 35%. So with that growth, what's happened is transportation dollars have gradually been squeezed and squeezed. This section of the budget is getting tighter and tighter and tighter because of the growth in Medicaid, as well as our growth in schools because of our population growth. That 1,000 people a day moving to Texas aren't all already high school graduates. Many of them are coming into our public school systems, and when you want to get into immigration, we can talk about what the federal government's doing to us with unlawfully present aliens in our school systems as well. So, the Economic Stabilization Fund, what we normally refer to as the rainy day fund. I don't like calling it that because it sounds like a piggy bank waiting to be broken. It's not. When you read the constitutional amendment that passed the Economic Stabilization Fund that y'all voted on, it deals with providing a buffer or a reserve to the state of Texas in the event of an economic downturn. If you remember, in 2009, legislature came into session, you had the economic downturn. Because we're a biennial legislative session, if you have that downturn in that 18 months that the legislature's not there, the governor, having some ability to either call the legislature back in and say, we've got to make decisions with what to do with the state budget. Do we either make reductions, or do we take something out of the Economic Stabilization Fund to buy time to be able to come into the next regular session and get through that economic wave that is similar to what we dealt with in 2008, 2009. The Economic Stabilization Fund, the bulk of the dollars that come into it are from the severance tax from oil and gas. So in November of every year, the comptroller gathers the taxes through the fiscal year, which runs from September 1st to August 31st. And in November, so in just a few weeks, the comptroller will certify the amount of dollars that come into the Economic Stabilization Fund.
Brian,
So, yes,
I hate
sir.
to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, Carter.
Are you telling us that the money, the taxes that have been designated as road and repair is not always being used for road and repair?
Yes, but what we're collecting isn't sufficient based upon the growth of the state of Texas. That's what that X and Y axis chart was, where the gas tax no longer brings in enough to keep up with the growth rate of the state of Texas.
So we're not using tax money for highways for something else?
No, that's been happening too. It's what's called diversions.
Yeah.
We've eliminated, it's gonna take us some time to get, but we've actually eliminated this last session about half of the diversions that were coming out of the budget where we'd appropriate it for this purpose, and if there were dollars left over in it, we'd sweep those funds and use it to balance others. And that's gonna take us some time to do that, but we're, under Senator Williams' leadership last legislative session, we actually got rid of about half of the diversions that were occurring. And we've still got more to go, but that will take us a little bit more. I think I can't promise 2-3 sessions, but it's clearly on the legislature's radar to get rid of the diversions and have a true taxing entity that says when you're taxed for this, that's what it's going to, or it's not being collected, and it's going to those things that are most appropriate to state functions. Sure. So the comptroller is going to make a deposit. I'm just going to use an example of $3 billion. Okay? So $3 billion will go into the Economic Stabilization Fund sometime in November. Now this is what we currently do. Before you vote on the proposition, this is how it's currently operating right now. So out of that $3 billion that gets deposited, okay, let's just $3 billion as an example. 25% of it, after it's certified, and 75% of it over here, 25% of it goes to education. Okay? So 25% of $3 billion is $750 million. Okay? The 75% would be $2.25 billion. Once she makes that deposit here, then the first $1 billion, okay, the first $1 billion here, okay, let me make sure I'm being exactingly, brutally, oops, you know, I hate technology here. I'm still an old single action guy. Pull hammer, pull trigger, that's complicated as I like my technology. True, it's true, you know. But the first billion.
Where's that money coming from? What's that?
This is the severance tax from oil and gas. So when the oil and gas industry is paying for wellheads and the like, taxes at the wellhead for production of oil and gas, that's where that $3 billion comes from. The first billion goes into what's called GR, general revenue, which is Texas tax dollars. Okay? So out of that, when I told you that last year our state budget of Texas tax dollars was $102 billion, that $1 billion would be deposited to that. Okay, so that's where that, so when we talk general revenue, that's taxes that are taxed in Texas, stay in Texas. All funds are taxes that you're taxed federally, that go to Washington, like Medicaid, other things, go to Washington and then come back with lots of cables attached from the federal government. Okay? After that first billion, then, okay, so that would now mean after the first billion, you've got 1.25 billion. Now, at that point, the remainder of that would go into the Economic Stabilization Fund, the ESF. Okay? And that's how we've had the growth in our rainy day fund, our Economic Stabilization Fund, which right now estimates are that at the end of this August, which is the end of the fiscal year, we run a 2-year biennium with 2 fiscal years in that 2-year budget process. The end of the 2-year budget this August will be a little bit over $8 billion in the Economic Stabilization Fund. Okay? So, the new structure would make this change. Okay? We'd still put the first billion in, right? We'd still put that first billion in, but then we would actually split it again, where 25% of it, or 25% of, or I'm sorry, if you split 1.25 billion up, that's what, 660,
65.
yeah, 65, yeah. 665 million would go to economic stabilization fund, and then the other 665 million would go to Fund 6, which is the highway fund. So, it's not a new additional tax, but it means that the economic stabilization fund will not replenish as fast a rate as it has been because of our severance tax collections. But it allows us to put those dollars into highways for new construction, repair, rehabilitation, and no toll roads. So that's what you would be voting on, is to make this split. In December, I'll sit on a committee that will meet to decide what the minimum balance is of that economic stabilization fund. Because in some ways, I don't want to say it's become an albatross. It's a great thing to have when you have that rainy day fund. But once it starts growing, and it's been growing faster because of our oil and gas business, it's looked at as this, you know, we got all this money over here, we got all that money over there, and people are wanting to dig into it. We don't want to do that, because we want to maintain a very robust state reserve, but we do want to set a minimum balance. Because one of the aspects that I did not explain that I'm going to do now is, let's just say, here's that 8.5 billion, okay, and you look at it as a glass of water. We want to say, okay, the minimum balance, right now the balance is 8.5 billion. Do we want to set the minimum balance at, let's just say, 5 billion? So that if the state hits a economic downturn and we end up having to spend dollars out of the economic stabilization fund, then what happens with that split that I showed you where it was 665 and 665, whatever the minimum we set as the minimum balance to retain, if the economic stabilization fund has to drop below that because we have to spend some amount of dollars to bring it below that refill threshold, if we cross that $5 billion threshold, again, just using that as an example, if we have to spend the rainy day fund down below the $5 billion, then this immediately reverts back to where both pipelines fill the economic stabilization fund first till it retains back to the minimum balance. So right now, we're splitting the pipeline, and if we had to spend down to below the minimum balance that we'll determine in December, if we do that, then both pipelines of funding have to feed the economic stabilization fund till you reach the minimum balance back to where you maintain a robust reserve.
Which means
And that's
you
what
would-
proposition
that
one
would
is.
mean at that point, you wouldn't have any money going toward the road building
Correct.
until it's been filled up again.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Why do you go through all that? Why can't you just take it out of the rainy day fund in the first place and forget that $1.2 billion and passing all this thing? To take a little piece of this, a little piece of that, to get what you got already that you could have just taken.
Because spending the economic stabilization fund requires not only a 2/3 vote of the legislature, but to put it in a constitutional amendment means we had to send it to you, the citizens.
Oh,
So I wanted to make sure.
so nobody can use it
Yet.
without voting on it and getting 2/3
No,
vote.
you could spin this down. Putting this structure into a constitutional amendment means you have to vote on that. Do you vote on spinning it down? No. 2/3 though still have to vote to spin that down. The citizens don't vote to spin it down, but you will vote over here as to the structure is, do I want to split the pipeline that's feeding the economic stabilization fund right now between economic stabilization fund and Fund 6? If you do, if at some point we have to spend down below whatever we set as a minimum balance, then at that point both pipelines will feed economic stabilization fund. You have to vote on this structure, but you don't vote, only the legislature votes on whether we spend those dollars or not. Yes, sir.
Assuming a worst-case scenario, how long would that 8.5 billion last? There's got to be an
That
estimate
depends on
somewhere.
that really depends on the discipline of your elected officials. I don't like spending it. I voted for this proposition. I also voted for the water one that you had last election cycle. There are lots of folks that I mean, there's one of the lieutenant governor candidates has said, let's use the economic stabilization fund to pay for everybody to go to college. I mean, okay, I mean,
It's not the Republican thing.
yes, it's not the Republican either. That leaves you one guess. But the point is that you only get to spend it one time. See, part of the state's credit rating and our credit worthiness isn't how much is in there, but that the fact that we have one. But as a percentage of the budget, how much should we retain? Let me explain my thought process to you from a military perspective. When the first thing a commander does when he gets his task, when he gets his mission, he has the task organized for that mission. The first thing he must do is designate his reserve. Now in the military, it's 2/3, 1/3, where 1/3 of your assets that are either organic or attached are designated as your reserve. Now, however you task organize those between the tank, mech, and the like, is however you want to do that. And then whatever your geographic area of apportionment is, you take that remaining 2/3 and array your forces to defend or attack in that particular area. Now, while we can't to maintain 1/3 of $102 billion would be a rainy day fund of 30-something billion dollars. That's not only impractical, but that would take many years to get there. When I voted in last session to send the proposition to you last election for the water fund, I didn't like going the route we did, but the end state was so important that it really didn't, I mean, it mattered, but it wasn't so bad a way of getting there. I would have rather have spent general revenue without tapping into the Economic Stabilization Fund to take care of both water and roads. But I was one vote of 31 on how the budget was done and the like. But the impact of water-related things was big enough that it's like, we need to do this. When it comes to roads, again, with the number of people moving into the state of Texas, gas mileage, some electric cars. Look, I'm not here to raise the gas tax. There's some efficiencies we've got to get in TxDOT before anybody even broaches that subject. All too often, we just got to raise taxes. That's the easy way out. We're not going to vote for the easy way out. But the $8.5 billion that's in there now, when we make that deposit in November, if y'all vote for the approval of the proposition, then the next time in next November, when the deposit gets made, the split will occur at that point. The split won't occur this November. Okay? It would occur the following year in 2015 and then on after that. I know I will be. We'll be more cautious with the economic stabilization because its replenishment rate isn't as fast. But we've had it where if we didn't do something with it, I don't want to bore you here, but it was becoming almost an albatross in the sense of there's going to be 12, there's going to be 14 billion, and at some point you have too large a reserve. And how do you get that back to the citizens? How do you make that productive? There's some thought of paying down some debt potentially. When I was in the finance hearing last month, Senator Whitmire, the dean, said, Senator Birdwell, don't you think it'd be appropriate to pay down debt? And I said, only if the structural thing that put you in debt in the first place is addressed before you spend the money. Not if let's just pay it down. It's like paying your credit card off again and again and again and again and again. So we're not, I am very, very cautious with this. But that is Proposition 1. That's what that's what you're voting on if you haven't already voted for Election Day.
So you're recommending yes?
I voted for it. That would be a recommendation. Because look, let me just, there might be something that, look, you have hired me to go make votes on your behalf.
Yes.
There might be a reason to vote to send something to you on a constitutional amendment like this and be against it. I don't know what that would be, but you hired me to do that, so I leave myself that option if I think something's, okay, I need to send this to the people to make this decision, but ultimately representative government means I voted for this, I'm standing up here and tell you, this is what I think we ought to do. Is it how I would have built it? Is it how I would have done it? No. But it was the best structure I could work with Senator Nichols, along with the other, he's the chair of transportation, to come up with a mechanism to get some dollars into our road structure that had the I don't want to say escape hatch, but had the mechanism that said, if we have a downturn, the first thing I've got to do is restock my reserve. Because when I'm assigned a mission as that commander, if I use my reserve, after that mission's over with, when I begin the reconstitution process, the first thing I have to reconstitute is my reserve.
Any possibility of a better structure? If you're not happy with that structure, is there any possibility of a better structure?
Well, there would be a possibility of that, but it would have to be a tweak to this that we, again, would have to come back to you as citizens to say, here's the constitutional amendment to fix it. Because whatever the people have the authority to decide, the people are the ones that get to change it. So in sending this to you, this isn't something that we could change legislatively without going back to you, because you're the ones granting us permission to do this. He who has the authority to delegate has the authority to retract that authority.
And for how long of a period of time, and how do we know that that money's going towards the road? Will it be reallocated to something else without nothing being said to anybody?
The constitutional amendment specifies that it has to be to roads, no toll roads, but your suspicion of TxDOT is well warranted, and something that I've spoken with Senator Nichols about to make sure that we're not doing this and then have somebody play stump the chump with us.
Senator,
Yes, sir. Yeah, Pastor.
Is there another way to do it without it being a constitutional amendment? Do we not have a mechanism? I hate the Texas Constitution. My God, it's, you know.
Yeah, everything's an amendment as opposed to in statute.
Why can't it be a statute or a, you know, if it has to come to the people, why can't it come as a referendum or something like that that you put before the voters?
The proposition is a referendum.
Right, but not having it be an amendment to the Constitution, I mean, really, that's stupid.
But that's how Sam Houston,
I know.
Lamar, and our founders gave us the.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at, I'll be honest with you, I don't know which is worse. Looking at the federal model where there's only 28 amendments, but look at the mess we've got.
Sure.
As opposed to the Texas model that everything's an amendment, but at least you're getting a say. There's a lot of things that we vote on that don't have to go to the folks to the citizens for amendment. In fact, one of the amendments that was on the last ballot proposition was an amendment I'd sponsored to get rid of an agency that's been, you know, essentially non-existent for 20-something years. That's how long it takes to get, you know. This is the structure that the founders of Texas, in writing our Constitution as a nation, and then modifying it very slightly to be a part of the Union, gave us. So that's why you see so many propositions for the citizens to change the Constitution each year.
If we left the Union, could we start over?
I will tell you, I certainly understand the sentiment, but there are 3 secession movements that the state of Texas, with which we are affiliated. One is the independence of the United States. Because of our adoption and falling into the Constitution of the United States, we accepted the Declaration, the Constitution as original law, and coming into the Union in 1845, we adopted the American Revolution as our model. Second was the Texas War for Independence, and third was the Civil War. All 3 of those were at the business end of the bayonet. There is no legislative mechanism to secede from the Union.
You're talking about the war of northern aggression.
I wouldn't mind seeing a war of southern aggression right now against the capital, but no. But yes, the point is that when folks talk about secession, the spirit is, look, we don't need the constant adult supervision of Washington, D.C. Tell us how to suck the egg on everything from light bulbs to whatever else.
Diesel fuel.
the diesel fuel, you know, what the EPA is trying to do to us with coal. You know, I mean, if the parts per billion, and, you know, on the, you know, global warming altar, we're going to eliminate the number of coal-fired plants that we have. You know, when you want to turn on your air conditioning in July, it isn't going to work. Or in some cases, your heat in January or February.
Or the cost of milk or anything else.
So, the federal government has a proper role and function. But it has clearly gone down the road of micromanagement. I mean, just think about it, just conceptually, just think about it. We get to elect, we're going to the ballot box right now and electing a governor, lieutenant governor, and 7 other statewide office holders in the executive branch. We're electing 3 members of the Supreme Court, 3 members of the Court of Criminal Appeals. Texas has 2 Supreme Courts, one for the criminal side and one for civil. We're electing county commissioners, state reps, state senators, state board of education. We're electing all those folks, and yet somehow the folks in Washington think we're too stupid to manage our affairs. So that's a cultural challenge with which we're dealing with, and part of the reason the Tea Party is sprung up and has become so strong is that sentiment that says, look, we just look at marriage-related issues. I mean, if you want to get into that, we can. But I saw a hand go up. Was that you, Judge? Oh, I thought. Oh, okay.
Okay, how much was in the rainy day fund a few years back? Say 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
About 10 plus
11 billion.
Right. The last November, when you approved the $2 billion.
Right, for the water bill.
Right, for the water bill, when the comptroller, when the election was certified as passing, it was sometime in early December when the comptroller wrote the $2 billion check, set it aside. She took the $2 billion out of the Economic Stabilization Fund, set it aside, and as the Water Development Board has been developing the rules for application of those funds, it's actually been split up, not in other funds, but in cash management.
What's happened with that?
None of it's been dispersed yet, but it's garnered somewhere around $30 to $40 million in interest since last year. So some of the corpus is being protected so that it is interest that folks are borrowing off of, and then as those dollars are paid back, because it's a low interest loan, and the state of Texas buys down your interest rate.
Has there been a lot of loans?
No, not yet, not yet. They have not had, they've put in, the Water Development Board has put in place, or is about to finalize the rules for application that say, here are the criteria of the water projects that we will provide funding to. There are 16 regional planning districts in the state of Texas. Each of them are going to come into the Water Development Board and say, here's our top 5. The Water Development Board might say, your top 5 don't rate, based upon the, because that's part of the problem we had was that the Water Development Board had no dollars to make any decisions, and then the regional planning district would come up, and with the geopolitical subdivisions of all, nobody get anything, because not only was there no money, but there was a giant fight between the 16 regional districts. So our water problem was exacerbated by putting no dollars against the plan when it was originally adopted back in '97. This was the way of taking a $2 billion corpus, letting it grow, and in having low interest loans paid out, that $2 billion will buy 20 or so billion as dollars are loaned, paid back.
Or 50.
Or maybe, could be. It depends on how well it's managed, but it's being cash managed in the sense of letting the principal grow, earn interest, and then loan some things out in short term that are smaller projects. 10% have to be conservation related, most of which will be pipelines because of the loss of water. The amount of acre feet of water we lose in old pipelines. 20% has to be rural. In areas that are rural parts of Texas, like Clifton. I've got a project that I know is going to get submitted in Clifton down in Bosque County, as well as Falls County down in Marlin. They've got a reservoir. Now, the money will buy you either pipes or a deeper hole, but the Lord's got to send the rain to fill the hole. There's no, there might be some
have reservoirs which you can suck out of one reservoir and flood it into another one, using all those pipelines and all that infrastructure. Isn't that correct?
No, there's not. If you're talking about an interbasin transfer, is that what you're describing?
Yep.
Some of that I think can occur in East Texas, but I
Yeah,
think
it's
West
already
Texas, yeah, I think Central and West Texas don't, because as you know, terrain-wise, as you move from east to west, becomes more arid, less dense in the way that the size of the pipeline and the length of those are an eminent domain challenge. Yes, yes. So, so some of the things associated with the Water Development Board's funding is some will be short-term to get some immediate gains, immediate wins, and then some longer-term things that may take 5-6 years to build.
And those water board individuals are
They're
appointed.
They're
right?
appointed by the governor, correct.
Yeah.
One of them
There's
is
no- You can't get rid of them if you don't like them.
no, you can impeach anybody for any reason. Yeah, I mean, too many people, I mean, look, it's not a bullet you shoot carelessly. But you can impeach anybody for any reason. This cultural stigma that impeachment is just an afterthought of criminality is crap. You can impeach anybody for just being blatantly incompetent.
Right.
That's too many. We don't have too many people. We don't have enough people in Washington understand that. We sure as hell don't have enough judges that understand it. But yeah, impeachment was a political punishment, not an afterthought to criminal punishment. So let me cover a couple other things here. Let's talk border for a moment. That was, I mean, that was just really personal to me. Immigration is primarily a primacy of the federal government. There are some things that the state's government is doing. When folks talk about border security, that is a critical element of national security, but it's not the only thing. You've got to have defense not only at the border, but in depth in the country. I had a discussion with one of the members of our Texas congressional delegation back in June about student visas and the like. And there was some discussion of should we have more student visas, should we have fewer? And I just rolled up my sleeve and I said, this is what it looks like for students who overstay their visas. 40% of our immigration problem is people that come to the country legally and then never go home and overstay their visas. What happened back in late May, June, when you had the flood of unlawfully present aliens, some unaccompanied minors, some adults, some mixture, is you had a flood of people coming to the United States for whatever reason. I don't really care about the reason, to be brutally honest with you. To violate the law, there's no act of righteousness that says it's okay to violate the law and stroll across the border, particularly with what the federal government makes us do in the way of health care, education, and the like. And we can get into that if y'all want to talk about that. The governor made the decision, along with the lieutenant governor and the speaker, that because of the flood of people coming, a couple things were happening. I love my dry erase board. I'm a visual learner, particularly on like the Proposition 1, to try to explain that without, I mean, when you start getting the numbers and anyway, here's El Paso. You've got the Big Bend, and then here's the Gulf. Between Brownsville and Laredo's like up here, but this is, give you an example, this bracket of space right here is DPS Region 3, and then that's 700 miles, and then this bracket is DPS Region 2, which is 500 miles. The bulk of the human trafficking or illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and the like is coming through an area that's about 150 miles in what's called the Rio Grande Valley. Now, the reason people come into that area is one very simple reason. Say that again, ma'am?
The water's shallow.
The water's shallow.
Good answer, good answer. Survey said, you know. Well, it is the channel of life support. When you look at the density of Mexico, whether that's urban, I mean, it's why in our expansion westward, in the winter months, people went the Santa Fe Trail, and in the summer months, they went the Oregon Trail. Why? Because of food and water, and in this case, urban development. As you move out into the farther west areas that are more arid, you're now talking about high desert, and you will need very specialized training to survive in that. And because of its less densely populated areas, because the life support isn't picking berries off it. The life support is towns and people and, for lack of a better term, safe houses that are moving you from, or that train we're talking about. So what we did is the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker did what we call a DPS surge, where the DPS can enforce criminal laws of the state of Texas. The DPS is not authorized to enforce the immigration laws of the United States. So, what we did is we put people in this bracket by pulling folks out of the other regions, whether it was Amarillo, Texarkana, Boston, Houston. We took individual folks out of these other divisions in the state of Texas, these other regional commands of the DPS, put them down on the border to supplement the Border Patrol to have additional eyes on target. It was very effective, still going on, and that will go on through at least January. Because if you heard the governor, if you remember the press conference, he said, I'm going to pay for this through budget execution. What that means is the governor can say, for this emergency, that I'm not only declaring, but then the lieutenant governor, their speaker sign off on it, and the members of the legislative budget board, which is 4 additional senators and 4 representatives, say we're going to take money from this account that we have not spent yet and move it over here. So there's a cost associated with, diversion is not the right word I want to use, but moving dollars from one account to another to pay for that overtime. And there's a price to be paid in law enforcement up here where you take, if I've got 100 guys in the Amarillo region and I pull 10 of them out, I've got 10 less patrolmen, 10 less. So there's an impact of law enforcement availability. When you surge down here, they're not up here operating in their normal duty strength position. There are 13 zones that are the hot zones where folks are coming across here. In July, the governor's...
How long is that?
The hot zones, those 13 zones, I think about 60, 70 miles. It is paired to the Border Patrol. One of the things when I went down to the border back in August, I was very pleased with what I saw with the Border Patrol. I would tell you that our national immigration failure isn't because Border Patrol agents are lazy. The biggest bulk of our problem is when the Border Patrol makes an apprehension, when they turn them over to immigration and immigration and customs enforcement. That's where the failure begins of catch and release and the like.
So we're long term, there's 3,000 today.
And how many of them were criminal? I mean, it's just unconscionable what's happening. But in that area, the governor also said in July, it's so critical that we're going to put Texas National Guard on the border. Because this is a Texas mission, Texans pay for it. Okay, they are not federally activated. They are activated by the governor. Therefore, the state of Texas pays for those guardsmen to go down there, because in their first chain of command, the National Guard belongs to the governor unless federalized, and then at that point they answer to the call of the President of the United States. Our guys have not been federalized. They are simply supplementing the DPS, eyes, ears, communications to keep eyes on the border. They do not detain. They can detect. They can defend themselves. DPS can detain, so the guard guys contact DPS and say, I got somebody coming across, please detain. Because remember, law enforcement does the detaining. Military is only there as eyes on target. They can defend themselves in life-threatening situation. They are not down there and can be killed, just, they can't defend themselves. But they are not in a law enforcement position. They're in a eyeballs and a community watch kind of circumstance. Yes, sir.
How many fatalities, if any, have we had down there in that respect? Detaining or preventing people from crossing?
We've only had the one casualty that was a murder of the DPS or the Border Patrol agent that was fishing. We have not had any casualties of people that were on duty in that, because in most cases what we believe has been happening is on the southern side, Mexico is not a failed state, but it's going that direction. Most of the Mexican side of the border is controlled by the drug gangs, and on the eastern side it's the Zetas. Most of what's happening is the human traffickers are moving folks into the border area, and one of the reasons we had to put people down there is Border Patrol would go apprehend because they're looking to be caught. The dynamic here during the crisis in June was folks weren't coming across to not get caught, they were coming across to get caught. Well, similar to Patton sitting at Calais, over across from Pas-de-Calais, hoping that he'd keep those panzer divisions of the Nazi Germany in place, and then we attacked in Normandy. When we've got our guys going to where the people that are trying to be caught are, what are we missing in those areas that we don't have people or that are overwhelmed? That's been the biggest reason why we put DPS and Guard on the border, because you may have what would militarily be called a feint or a deception operation that allows drugs and other things that gangs down here don't want detected, that get across into Texas and on into the rest of the United States.
Well, I guess what I really was referring to also was how many we shot that are coming across. How many we taken care of and didn't get across?
I'm not aware of any lethal actions. The bulk of what happens is when DPS apprehends somebody. In fact, we actually, I was flying in one of the like the Magnum PI helicopters that DPS has. We actually had, I kid you not, 4 people in a little, like a Navy pilot survival raft, rowing across, I kid you not, rowing across the river. The helicopter hovered. He had communications with border agents that are about 100 yards in. Border agents came over to sit underneath the helicopter. They sat down. Border Patrol guys pick them up. If DPS had to pick them up, DPS detected, Border Patrol detained. DPS can detain, but if the only charge is immigration violation, they're turned over to the Border Patrol. If they're detained for some other reason, we have probable cause to believe that, drug possession, we can detain and enforce those laws. But if it's solely immigration, we get into the Border Patrol. Border Patrol then takes them to I don't want to say a confinement facility, but a confining type of facility for disposition from immigration and customs enforcement. The real problem here is that in doing this and only having the ability to enforce criminal law, not immigration law, given the number of people that are trying to cross the border, in some ways it's almost as if the state of Texas is helping the federal government complete human trafficking. I mean, it's insane. That picture you see of Senator Patrick and myself doing this in that hearing down in McAllen back in July, is we're just sitting there in stunned amazement going, all we're really doing is playing our section of the trafficking. And it's, this is the complicit actions of the federal government that we're having to deal with. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, Brian, what percentage of the crossings, of the illegal crossings occur in the Rio Grande Valley zone?
Within Texas, this is overwhelmingly 70–80%. Some of this out here, in fact, when Mel and I went out to Big Bend back in December of last year, and a quick note, you know how we chose Big Bend? We went to the AT&T, Verizon, or what was it, Verizon or AT&T? What do we have, babe?
Verizon.
Right, we went to the Verizon service map, found the dead spot, went to it. For about a week. So we said, we're going to Big Bend, But there is some lonely territory out here. We went down to Lajitas. How many of y'all familiar with Lajitas? Great place. We went down to Lajitas, and then when we came back, we went over to Presidio and then up to Marfa. And I only saw that's where I guess they're building the roads. I saw one TxDOT truck in that 50 miles, and very little of it was cell covered. But it's very, there are three types of terrain in the military: go, slow go, and no go. A lot of this is no go terrain with cliffs that the river has cut through. Other parts is even if you can cross the river easily, that hundreds of miles to get to the river in that desert environment, I mean, it would require survival training at Special Forces Ranger, those kinds of guys. But a lot of this we can cover with propeller fixed wing aircraft. Because it's so open, it's easy. This area is, I don't want to say it's easy patrol, but it's easier. You don't need as many individuals standing 50 meters apart like you do here in the more, you've got a lot of the river that does this. I mean, even though this is a straight line down here, the river does a lot of this down there. And so, you know, I mean, with the brush and the cover, you've got a lot of places for cover and concealment down here, plus the life support along the Mexican coast of urban areas that you can traffic and move through. So
I had no idea the percentage was that high down there.
It is. I mean, and part of that's because they were looking to be caught.
Yeah.
And so the difficulty is this. If we can be effective enough to make it so difficult for the Zetas to move through the Rio Grande, remember, we're paying for that. We'll pay for the DPS through January, February. The Guard guys go away in December because the cost of this, here's the real frustration of having to do this. The people of the state of Texas are paying twice for border security they should have paid for once. Our tax dollars that go to the federal government, the people of Texas not only have to pay for the border here, just like the people of Kansas and the people of Maine, but the border up in Montana. We as taxpayers pay our federal tax dollars to make those borders secure. Because this one is not, we've taken it upon ourselves for the safety of Texans down in the Rio Grande Valley, whether it's from a medical perspective, a criminal perspective, human trafficking. And there are people that get trafficked in the United States that don't want to be here, that get brought in the United States for labor, sex trade, and the like, that were not coming of their own accord. But you're having to pay for that twice. We cannot sustain that in perpetuity. Will we get reimbursed by the federal government? Highly unlikely. I mean, we could ask, but anyway, you really think you'll get a reasonable answer from?
Can we just sue?
Yes, ma'am.
In recent events, is there a scenario that, looking forward, that if there's an Ebola outbreak in Mexico, which they are not able to contain, that it would be getting more authority to give it to those people that are guarding the border to turn people back? Is there a scenario already planned?
That I do not know, ma'am. The president is the one that has the authority to allow the DPS to enforce immigration law, and the president has not concurred with that.
So Texas is also not doing anything then.
Yeah, this is
in that case of emergency.
right, and this is why I have profound disagreement with the performance of this president.
Will.
And this is why elections matter. You know, the Declaration says the consent of the governed. I believe we've gone clearly from not just incompetence but to malicious malfeasance. I mean, that's where we are. And so the people of the United States will have to decide the kind of leaders that they want. And if we continue to vote for this kind of incompetence, we'll continue to get this kind of incompetence.
Brian, did you see today on the news where Cook County, where Chicago is, they found several voting machines that have been tampered with.
Yeah, I'd heard that there were voting machines that were tampered. There were, in North Carolina, there were about 150 registered voters who were voters that were, for lack of a better term, amnestied under the President's Deferred Action Program, that are not, they're not citizens but were registered to vote. I mean, that's why the voter ID thing was, look, I don't like losing elections, but I want to know that citizens that were authorized and lawfully voting, if I lose the election, okay, fine, I can work on it again the next time. But if you get to stroll across the border, stick your hand out and say, you not only owe me Medicaid, Medicare, you know, housing, I mean, but you also get to come vote and decide, you know, the disposition of federal dollars to my benefit, and I'm not a citizen. Look, Mel and I have been stationed in countries around the world, and I've been in a few on my own on operational deployments. You know, we went to Germany. I was physically present in West Germany. In fact, we were there during the time that they voted to reunite and become Germany again instead of East and West Germany. Just because I was physically there didn't mean I get to vote. I mean, citizenship's an affair of the heart, not a convenience of geographical presence. And anyway, and we're cheaping, and if I may, Pastor, I mean, even Pontius Pilate gets that right with Christ. What are the two things Pontius Pilate gets right with Christ when he first comes before him? One, he sees an innocent man, but two, what's he do? He sends him to Herod. Why? Because he's not a Roman, he is a Galilean. Even Pontius Pilate gets citizenship right. And citizenship knows no ethnicity. And yet, anyway, I'm getting spun up. I didn't mean to. What other Yes, ma'am.
I heard a rumor.
Uh-oh.
That the same progress that or process that Colorado went through to pass or legalize marijuana is starting to develop in Boston.
I would think that's true if for no other reason that Colorado used to be a pretty reliable red state, and then folks moved in there, like Battleground Texas has moved into Texas to turn Texas blue. That same structure is what turned Colorado blue. So as a subset of turning it Democrat, you would get legalization of marijuana, other things that come with being a blue state, higher taxes and the like.
Gun control.
So while I am not consciously aware of a let's legalize, I mean, I get people that sign my guest book in the Austin office, you know, support medical marijuana.
But there's no legislators writing.
Not of which I'm aware, but once we come into legislative session, that's when you'll start to see what bills get filed and the like, to see what really hasn't. Sometimes you'll see a bill filed, and it's almost like an poker game where, okay, I'm going to file it now, and the next session I'll file it and actually try to get it a hearing, and then the next session and so it's that incrementalism. But I'm not aware of any active, let's legalize. I mean, Austin's staying weird. It's not,
But Coloradans got to vote on that. It couldn't be passed without Texans being able to vote on it.
I believe that is the case, but I cannot speak with direct authority. I'd have to do take that for the record, so to speak, and go back and research. The thing is that what's so criminal about it is that it wasn't just Colorado, but I think it was also Washington State that did so in direct violation of federal law. So you not only have President Obama choosing what actions that he will punish because he wants to dissuade that action, you also have the federal government choosing what not to enforce because they like the idea of it happening even though it's against the law. Like immigration, the marijuana laws are the same. And when you look at the damage done, not only physically, but culturally and socially with illicit drugs, I mean, that's not the country that I want to live in. I mean, I do not want to get comfortable with our deprivation. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I
I'm curious about these 1,000 people a day that are moving here. Do you know of any trends about where they might be moving from and how it might impact the political climate of our state? Like this lady was talking about, that things become more liberal, not because of the people that live here, but because of people moving here.
Right. Every time, I like Governor Perry, but I cringe every time he's in a blue state saying move here. Stop! Stop, please! But I don't know if you've heard Governor, or I'm about to say Governor Abbott, Attorney General Abbott, talk about, all those people crossing the border, we call them Californians. But there's a lot of that happening where people are voting with their feet. Part of the reason is because Texas has a more passive, we don't punish achievement. I mean, if you're a successful business, we don't go, well, you got that ill-gottenly, and so we're going to punish you for it. Like, Illinois, New York, and all that. But you have people that are voting with their feet because they're tired of either subsidizing what ought not be subsidized, whether it's in California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, and the like. And I don't know, we saw this, Mel and I saw this a little bit when we were still on active duty in Virginia. Virginia used to be a solidly red state. The last time it had voted Democratic was 64 with Johnson. And then when it went for Obama in 08 was the first time it had gone Democrat since Johnson in 64. But because of all the folks in Maryland, New Jersey, New York that were going, I'm out of here, and then arrive in Virginia and then vote for the same crap that they had been escaping. I mean, it's like the Ebola infection. I mean, that's what, so if you have neighbors move in next to you and they say they're from California, give them the inquisition about, how are you going to vote? I mean, because I've heard folks on the radio here. There was one guy that called in, Mark Davis, a couple of years ago. I was looking, you're in Texas, you don't do this. The way we did it in California. Mark Davis was like, I cordially recommend you move back to California. But that's a very big, that's part of the reason why we've got to get out and vote. Look, I know the Tea Party's not partisan, but you've got to vote those principles, because the biggest fear with this election is if we just assume Texas is a solidly red state, Greg Abbott's going to win, no problem, but on those down ballot races, if you're not showing up and voting down ballot, then the state rep, state senator, the district judge, in those districts that are more balanced, or what might be considered swing districts, we might not have the state that you wanted. And if the Democrats can spend gobs and gobs of money, when Governor Perry won in 2010, he won by 14 points. Even if Senator Davis loses, but she only loses by 4 or 5 points, that will tell all those folks that were donating money, give even more, because next time we'll win Texas. And like what happened in Dallas County in 06, Kay Bailey Hutchinson won that election of Dallas County. She won it because people went in and pushed the button for Kay, but didn't go down the other races, state rep, district judges, county judge, and the like. The Democrats did, and so Kay wins, but the county turns blue. And just like what John Adams said, once freedom lost, getting it back is harder. So losing that county, getting it back to being red, is far harder than keeping it red. Yes, sir.
We're trying very hard to eliminate candidates, or not candidates. We're trying to eliminate people that are in office that are not doing what we think is right. Kiefer is one of them. My question to you is how much, to what extent can we depend on you to assist us in removing people like this. We needed it this last time around and we didn't get it. Where are you able to go with your support for us?
Are you talking about endorsements, or is that the?
Yes, that's, I don't know whether you know, I'm sure if you endorse, it makes an awkward position, but you know, life is awkward at best. You have to work with what you have to work with, but you also have to stand up for what is right, and what is right for the state of Texas and this nation. And getting rid of Kiefer is one of the right things to do.
Each race is its own decision. I made 2 endorsements, one for Senator Paxton to be Attorney General, and then one for Glenn Hager to be Comptroller. I have had a very good working relationship with Representative Keffer, particularly on water-related issues that we dealt with the BRA and others. Each race, each person, each is its own decision as to what races in which to involve and which ones in which not to be involved, because they each bring their own dynamics. There are also dynamics associated with House and Senate. There are some senators that will endorse in House races. I generally don't, because you get into the dynamics between House and Senate. And ultimately it's up to your discretion. So it really depends on, each person has to evaluate pros, cons, where to make an endorsement, where not to make an endorsement, and the like.
So our candidate wasn't any good? Is that what, in your opinion, was he not worthy?
Or it's one you don't know. I mean, like, there are some candidates that I've gone out and not done commercials with, but I've done events helping get out in Ellis County. Saturday night I was in Ellis County because there's a commissioner's race that's opposed between a Democrat and Republican. But it's in the general. This is our candidate. Now there might be some general candidates that I might think that, oh my gosh, this person's so horrible, I won't come out and help them, even though they're the Republican, because it's, as you say, my reputation is at stake if I endorse or don't endorse. And getting to know those folks, I will overwhelmingly support my party nominees. But when you get into the primary politics, endorsements are very rare, simply because of the nature of contested races and folks that have to make the decision on what's best for them. Particularly when you start getting into your home county, those dynamics can really make choosing not to or choosing to even more perilous.
So can you help educate us? If we have a weak candidate, can you educate us and let us know, hey, you're going the wrong road?
I've usually done that on an individual basis as opposed to public, in a private basis as opposed to public. If somebody asks me a question, what's ground truth on this issue, that issue, I'll do my best to do so, but not dominate an individual voter as to how they should or.
How about the Tea Party, though? I'm talking about educating maybe the Tea Party and let us know what road to take.
Yeah.
We want to go the right road, but the right road leads to a safe nation.
I appreciate that question because it implies a trust and confidence in me, and so let me say thank you for that. But I'd be happy to visit with Green or Don on here's the issue.
Yeah.
But stepping forward and endorsing, you must be absolutely deliberate. I mean, there were people that were on the ballot that I thought were good folks, but I didn't endorse for this simple reason, that once I endorse there, I will begin the flood of people wanting my endorsement from other races and other places, that I had to set the bounds of where I would endorse and where I would not. The reason that it was easier and proper for me to do Senator Paxton and Senator Hager is because I had worked with both of them in the Senate on their respective committees, and I knew those gentlemen well. The other candidates for statewide, I knew, like Sid Miller, great guy from down in Erath County. But I'd worked with Sid when he was a House member, but it depends on who else is on the ballot. and the dynamics of, do I endorse somebody that's in the Senate versus House versus who else is on the ballot? I mean, that's part of the reason you, before you even make an endorsement, you wait to see who's going to be on the ballot. And I mean, give you an example. President Bush endorsed Senator Sibley in my original race when I stepped forward to run. He didn't even know I was on the ballot when he made that endorsement. Now, did he know Senator Sibley from his time as governor? Absolutely. He was a good friend and the like. But it put him in an uncomfortable circumstance, and in fact, I called his chief of staff and said, look, I'd love to have President Bush's endorsement, but what you need to know is I'm on the ballot, so that if you put President Bush in front of somebody in the press, he's not surprised with the question, why did you endorse Sibley over Birdwell, even though you know both? And that'd be the first time. So you, again, those, I mean, they're all.
But that's part of the job, isn't it?
Very deliberate. Well, I mean, I don't think he expected anybody to step into it. But after I won, he called me and said, okay, now that you've caught the car, what are you going to do with it? So it was good. Other question, I don't know where we're on time. Hold on a second, Pastor. Does anybody that hadn't already asked a question have one?
I have a question.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Then I'll get to you, Pastor, for a minute.
How do you find out about judges?
Judges are very hard. They really are, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Over my cold, dead body will we appoint judges. It's clear that the federal model doesn't work.
True.
This is true. I mean, well, the federal model works if you have a Congress that will do its job and check the judiciary. Article 3, Section 2 gives the Congress the ability to set the bounds of what the courts can hear. And we don't have a Congress that will do that right now. We haven't had that for many years. So every time I hear somebody say, judge is appointed for life, I say, show me the word life in Article 3, Section 1. It's not there. Judges are difficult. The best way, and babe, I don't know, you know how to do this. The best way to learn about judges is look at voter vault to see when they voted in primaries. My brother ran for a district judge position back in 2008. Yeah, it was 2008. Oh, I'm sorry. My brother ran for a district judge position that was being vacated. There were 4 candidates, including himself. One of the candidates had been voting in Democratic primaries since 2004. And so the question to that person is, unlike when in 2008 when Rush had the, what was it called, vote for Hillary to keep her in the race, Operation Chaos. So I've seen, like, there's some, like one of our county commissioners, a great guy up in Johnson County, but he voted Democrat in that one primary in 2008. But he had a strong Republican record before that, strong Republican afterward. But the best way to deal with a judge, because most of the time they'll say, I'm running for office, but I can't tell you what I believe because that case might come before the court.
Right.
Well, that's not quite true. But if you go look at their voting record, if you've got a judge that's standing before you saying, I'm running for such and such and I'm a Republican, but the last 6 primaries they voted Democrat, the best question is, please describe your Damascus Road experience that brought you from being a Democrat to a Republican. And if they can't explain that, don't vote for them.
So where do you go to get that information?
How do you get the...
Your county chair will have to get it for you. You have to have somebody vet your candidates because only certain people have access to voter vault. So you have to have somebody really vet your judge candidates, your judicial candidates.
Right.
Which is something that we as a party don't do great. We have to do better, which is obvious in our local school board race. We haven't done a great job of vetting candidates.
All right, let me take Pastor's question. We'll make that the last one because my stomach is rumbling because all I've had today is a small little salad and some cheese nips. Politics is a lot like Ranger School. No food, no sleep, no friendlies, no problem. Go ahead, Pastor.
Not so much a problem, a question is an observation. As a pastor, as I look at this gathering, this looks like church on Sunday morning. A lot of great, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but if you're young and you got kids and you walk in and what you see is a bunch of Q-tips sitting, okay? I have gray hair here, so, but where, I said when I got here, where's the people under 25 that are here? I think that, we need to reach out to group.
They're home helping their kids with homework.
They may be home helping their kids with homework, but how are they gonna vote? How are they gonna know what and who to vote for if we don't reach out to them?
If you raised them right, they'll vote right.
That's true.
What was it Churchill said, if you're young and a liberal, you don't have a brain. If you're old and a conservative, you don't have a heart, or something like that. You're right. All too often you get kids that are, churches are dealing with this. Churches and families are what make great citizens, not government. And government, as a government official, I want great citizens, because great citizens, I don't have to incarcerate, I don't have to litigate, and so when you have folks that, from that Romans 13 perspective, do righteous as opposed to unrighteous, because government's an avenger against the unrighteous. But we have to train future generations to value and love not just their nation, but value and understand the proper role and function of government. Let me do one real quick thing, if I may, Pastor, because because let me go to my Bible app here, see if it pops up. Come on, here we go. I think I can. All right. Oops. Hold on.
Is that a truck driver phone?
Yes, there is. It's my mother.
I'm going to Deuteronomy here. Hold on a second.
I got one on my phone and can't get up.
I think it's actually Deuteronomy 18. Man, my verse in my chapter backwards here.
It's kind of like the state constitution.
Yeah.
He's a preacher, he can probably tell you where it is.
Well, I'm an Anglican, I don't know that.
I think it's, I'm drawing a blank on the proper chapter and verse, but it's the chapter in Leviticus, or I'm sorry, Deuteronomy, that speaks to open your hand to your poor brother and give generously. God will bless you in your endeavors when you do so. When you read that scripture, particularly when you look at all the different scriptures that deal with charity, are those instructions to you, the individual, and you, the church, or to government? Because remember what government has that the church and individuals don't have.
Power to tax.
Monopoly, well, no, it's not just power to tax. The monopoly on the use of force.
Coercion.
Because if I'm tithing as a cheerful giver, it's out of love and respect and obedience to the Father. You don't have to love and respect and obey the Father for me to take from you. But if you vote for me, because I'm going to go take from somebody else because that's your act of charity, what have I done? Once you cross that threshold that says the church is going to endorse taking from some to give to others. Remember the story of the widow's mite? And we talked about, she gave out of obedience. What was the other lesson? She still owed the mite. She had to pay her portion. The rich men gave to be seen. She gave out of obedience, but both were still required to give. And we've got too many folks that look at government as the place that, whether it's charity and other things, that really is the function of the church. And that is haunting us today, particularly from the Johnson years, when the federal government came in the 40s, 30s during the Great Depression, with the Great Depression and the difficulty churches had in being charitable to 25% of the population was in, if not destitute, near destitute and the like. Government stepped in. when the Great Depression was over with, the government never stepped out.
That's right.
And then Johnson put it on steroids, and now we have, now we have 50% of the country that votes for a living, and the other 50% pay for that living.
Absolutely.
And so when churches have to, and I'm not picking on you, Pastor, but churches have to educate youngsters to know what the proper role and function of government is. Not turn to government as your first provider of resource, and oh, by the way, the level of government you turn to is federal. That's the problem we've had for half a century. And breaking that is and that's because we've all been the one living with it. But some of those 20-something-year-olds out there are going, oh, I got my Obama phone.
Yeah. And they're not bringing their kids to church.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Washington said it very well in his farewell address. Religion and morality are indispensable supports to a free republic. We have very little chance of maintaining our self-governance if we are not self-disciplined. And that's the moral issue, the cultural issues with which we are dealing. Because once government has sanctified an immorality as homosexuality, what's the next one? Because incest is consensual, polygamy is consensual, prostitution is consensual, drug abuse is consensual.
Pedophilia can be consensual.
So, and once your government doesn't act righteously, because remember, when the adulterous woman comes to Christ, he forgives her, but doesn't say, now that I've forgiven you, go revel in it. She said, go and sin no more. He does not sanctify. He loves the sinner, but does not sanctify the sin.
Flags up here. And we need to thank Brian and Mel for these flags.
New flags. We bought Republican headquarters new flags, and I just kind of cleaned these up because they were not real pretty. So
they fit.
They look much better now than they did. So.
The deal is, I have 2 flags at home. One of them flew over the state capitol. And one of them flew over the Capitol in D.C. And we were bringing those up here every month, putting them up. They've done, I think, made the stands for them. But then we had to break them down, put them up, set them up, all this. We don't have to do that anymore.
How many have not voted? I don't know if y'all got my blast, if you're on my email. If you're not, come to me and I'll put you on there. We have a situation here in the Independent School District. We have 2 candidates running for a position. Now I'm just going to tell you the facts, and you make your own decision. One candidate, Chris Tackett, has voted Democrat. He's supported by the Democratic Women of Hood County, endorsed by them. The other one is a strong Christian and very conservative, and that's Burge Thomas. Don and I voted, and we voted for Burge because the school, we've got to do something about our schools. And we can't miss this opportunity. Please tell your friends. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this shirt that, one of the things we need to do in that ministry is that, or somebody said about us all being old. We need to do something in Hood County in our school system, get young conservatives or young Republican club. Now these T-shirts will help with that. The money. Now, how many's going to vote for Wendy Davis? Okay. Here's a T-shirt for the ladies. So, if you make a $15 donation, you can have a shirt, and that money will go to young Republicans. Now this is totally different. I have 6 tickets here to Billy Bob's. And they're for Thursday. Okay, they're, I think I wrote the wrong one. I did. They're the last Thursday of the month, and there's 6 of them. And I picked them up, we went to Oktoberfest to the VIP thing, and they didn't sell, so I said, well, let me take them. I don't know if anybody likes to go there, but if you do, it's a great opportunity for you. They'll be cheap. You just make a bid on them and take them, and I'll give the money to them. So that's what I want to say. That's all I want to say.
Good job. My thing was gonna be, if you haven't voted, please vote. It is so important to get out and vote, and I know there's quite a few of us that haven't voted. And that's all right. I know some have to go to Johnson.
Yeah, we will.
I know
We're going Saturday.
But
Tell your Democratic friends.
one of our voters of the annex, Bill needs to get in and out. We were there Monday. There was, I believe, Victor told me there were 678 people voted Monday.
There you go.
She was really surprised and a good turnout. So if you haven't voted, you want to vote, really, that's where you go. It's not the way to follow the people who go to the precinct. But please vote. It's so important that you vote. That's how we control who gets elected in our county, our state, and further up. But remember, they say all politics are local. This is what we can control. We can control this right here in Good County. So we're very fortunate we have all Republicans in our county offices, and we want to keep them that way. Yes, ma'am.
I want to be sure everyone knows the polls are open Saturday and Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
Really?
They are in and if they would, when they get ready to have your ID out and don't stand there pulling on it for 20 minutes, holding up the line. I've worked early vote and they're just, it really delays a lot of people. They do that. So have it ready.
That's good information.
Oh, you're going
I want to repeat what you said
to do it.
before. What she learned from a meeting with the Colorado senator who said, conservatives, Republicans, typically the day after election go celebrate for a few months and close down the office, do nothing for a long time, and then they open it up again 3 months before the election. We can't afford to do that. We need to go back to work as soon as the election's over. The socialists are doing it, the radicals are doing it, the Islamists are doing it, and we sit back and do nothing for months. That is not the way we get our country back. And so that was a great thing I learned from our vice president, who spoke last week, whatever. And that's something we need to do. We don't need to go and celebrate for months and do nothing. We've got to go back to work and work on our agenda because they're working on their agenda. And to sit back and do nothing, we lose. So please, don't celebrate over a couple of days. We need to get back to work and reclaim our country, or we're going to lose it permanently. And that's sad.
We haven't won it yet either.
Where's the one?
Abbott signs just came in.
Abbott signs, but we're getting some more signs in for our school candidate tomorrow.
Not yard signs.
Huh? They're not?
There won't be any more yard signs.
Oh, they won't?
Just the big signs. There's
Oh.
What Brandy's saying, she sends out these email blasts. If we get no response to them, we don't want to burden you with these email blasts. We only send out, or she does all this, information that she thinks is pertinent to what's happening and around the area, especially our city and county, and then other places. You guys know we travel quite a bit around. We can go to different places. But if you don't want to get them, let us know so we don't want to use up your computer space or whatever, But if you'd like to continue getting them, we'll let her know because it's another job that she does. Yes, sir.
I heard something that I really appreciated earlier because my fellow Republicans, I recommend they vote straight ticket because that's how you begin to lose and become a blue state if you're not careful. If you can't support the whole line, then that's really what we need to do. And That's what I do, and that's what I recommend to my friends.
And it's free.
Yes, yes.
Well, I think this time, I mean, I don't normally do that, but I think since the Democrats have moved in, I mean, they've got like 1,200 people that they are paying in our state to get out the vote and all that. And yes, we have some good candidates running probably that are libertarian, independents, but we don't want to split the vote this time. Now, that's my thinking. You want to do what you want to do.
We encourage you to vote for straight ticket. And be sure to vote for Virg Thomas, the school board. It's important, this is an important position. I would sure like to see this young man get on. All right, anybody else got anything they'd like to say? We've kept you a while. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take it easy now.